I don't. There it is. Hold on. Hold on. That's looking a little better. Okay. Hi, everybody. No, we had some no audio, but that's because we have a reputation to maintain, and we are determined to maintain it. So here we are back at the Stratosphere Lounge, and I have to tell you, I am just completely obsessed. So let me tell you what I'm obsessed about, and then we will have ourselves a look at the questions. I haven't looked at them yet, as often for the last several days. But in any event, let me tell you what I've been doing with a lot of my time. First of all, this is not what I've been completely obsessed about, but you guys should be the first to know. The National Rifle Association has offered me my own show. So I'm going to be on NRA TV every day, 4 days a week. I want to say 2:30 Pacific. That sounds right. For a half an hour, and I'm doing a show on the culture. I'm going to do a show on the intersection technically between guns and the pop culture, but really more between patriotism and freedom and all the rest of it in the pop culture. So that's going to be cool. And it's not going to be anything that I'm going to be likely to running out of topics on. Kathy Griffith thing just stands out as one example. Thank you very much for all the congratulations, you kind guys. So that's been keeping me awful busy, getting ready for that. And we're real excited about it. That we'll probably get some upgrades to the studio here, and like I say, half an hour a day, and we'll see what we can do for members and so on. But it'll be out there on NRA TV once a day for half an hour with actual producers in Dallas. So it probably won't be the second worst produced show on the internet. It may do a little better than that, in fact. But I'm really looking forward to it. Probably we're still not completely locked down yet, but I suspect the format, what I would like it to be, is there's two segments in the half-hour shows. There's probably, 12 minutes each, something like that. And count the commercial times. So I'd like the first one to be basically commentary, and then the second one, at least one of them, if not two of them, are going to be interview segments. They originally said they wanted 2 interview segments, one guest for segment 1 and one for segment 2, and I said, that's swell and everything, but when would I get to talk? Everything that they apparently liked about me on the enough to offer me the show is as a result of me being a guest on Grant's show, and Grant asks me questions and I get to talk. When I'm asking other people questions, mostly I have to be quiet. So hopefully one segment, at least most of one segment, kind of a commentary thing, and then we bring in an interview either related to that particular subject, or we would do something like changing hands now. Let's go talk to so on and so forth. So anyway, it's exciting, and it's good to be able to get out there and produce daily content. I think it's going to look a lot better, and plus they're paying me. So that's all pretty good news. Excuse me for that long drink. So I love Aesop's Retreat. He's such a great guy. He says it's what happens when you work for it. High five, Bill. Thanks again for all the very kind comments here. It's going to be fun to talk about the pop culture. They want me to do it from inside Hollywood, which technically speaking, I more or less am. I'm certainly from inside Los Angeles. And I do have to be careful that I don't in any way oversell the amount of experience or certainly the amount of juice that I had in this town. I was just a screenwriter, didn't get anything sold, and was an editor for, I don't know, 7-8 years, something like that. But I know the business, and the main reason I think I'm really qualified for this actually was by just a stroke of luck. I was the longest gig I had ever, I think ever, including the one I'm doing now. I did 5 years, 6 years, as an editor for Sunday Morning Shootout with Peter Bart and Peter Goober. And that was an interesting movie talk show because the hosts weren't just the bubble-headed bleach blonde who comes on at 5. The hosts were Peter Bart and Peter Goober. Peter Bart was the editor of Variety. Peter Goober was certainly a major producer. And so as the editor of that show, I got to see virtually all of the off-camera commentary. The cameras were rolling, obviously. I wasn't on location, but I'd get 4 or 5 angles lock them up in sync, and generally they'd go on for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes before they'd actually start the show, and then they'd often do it afterwards, keep talking too. So I got a chance to really see, people behind the scenes, and that was great. So in any event, it's going to be the pop culture, and I find that when I get tweeted out by the NRA, I'm getting a little more. Yes, Bill did make a Don Henley reference there. Is that boner canoe? In any event, so that'll be great, and it's going to start on Wednesday. Wednesday and Thursday will be, I'm going to consider them broadcast tech rehearsals. We got a lot of things that we have to figure out, especially most important of which is the whole show's going to be switched from Dallas. So we're going to be opening the show up more as we get a little more technically, situated. There's a very important aspect of it would be to have the monitor behind me be able to be controlled from Dallas, so that if I'm talking about Kathy, what's her name, then I can have a picture of her up behind me, and that would just be groovy cool. So, what did I get? Oh, bone canoe. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, my vision's not what it used to be. That C looked like an R to me. I had a feeling that was a funny handle. Here it comes. Now we're going to hear a barrage of all these other things. But let me briefly tell you what I'm really obsessed about and stoked about. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, having not seen the comments yet. But, and it's got to do with this Star Citizen game. I spent 2 weeks just immersed in this. And for those of you who wrote me, I haven't had a chance to respond to any of you yet because it took me a week to get the drivers configured for this PC, and I was doing that in my spare time and moving the computer home, and it took me a long time to do that. It took me probably another week to get the controllers the way I wanted it, and all of this stuff was just technical stuff. Didn't even get a chance to go around, but I was, however. Oh, and by the way, somebody just mentioned this. I don't want to get off track, but somebody just mentioned I will be doing the Grant show. I'll still be doing that 10 o'clock in the morning hit. I love it. I love Grant. It's fun to work with, so I'm going to keep doing that. In any event, I've been watching a lot of movies about this. The game as it exists now, and this is not a talk about computer games. This is about something much bigger than computer games. So if you're thinking, oh, God, here goes Bill again with a computer game thing, hold on. The new version that's coming up is apparently coming up at the end of June. It's going to be significantly more territory, in fact, enormously more territory to explore. So I've spent 2 weeks just getting familiar with the game and how it plays and how it works. But then starting about a week ago, I started doing something that was a little different. I started taking pre-recorded game footage that other people had recorded, not just running around shooting. Some people out there, most of these people I assume are very young, but some of them understand that there's a detachable camera and that you can do cinematic shots. And so I found a guy who was doing, just looking for Star Citizen videos, I found a guy who did a bunch of cinematic shots in no particular order, just putting the camera relative to the character, relative to various buildings and so on, relative to the ships and all this other stuff. And I took that footage and I brought it into Premiere Pro, and this is the advantage of me being a total sci-fi game geek. As I said, if I'd been born a year or two earlier, I would have missed the entire boat. But now that I'm actually, have the means to have an editing system, thanks to guys like you and members especially, I was able to take this game footage, which composition-wise was pretty good, but still looked very, very computer gamey. And I put a bunch of film look filters on it. I gave it kind of a film look. I played with the contrast. I added a lot of grain. And I had to add something called a warp, which, believe it or not, slightly bends everything. Just slightly, well, you can crank it up to the point where you can't recognize it, but just slightly bends everything. And that got a fair amount of the computery look of it out. So far so good. I've been talking about, going in there and shooting movies and stuff, and there it is. Now, in the new version, in some new version, I don't know if it's the upcoming new version, I just saw something, that's why I was late. I couldn't put it down. In an upcoming version, I've seen the software. I just watched it work. they have a number of stock different heads, so you can replace the heads, but there are now, no fooling, you obviously can replace the eye color, the hair, and all the rest of it, but there are sliders for things like how tight is your jaw. So I'll be using that on myself quite a bit. There are sliders to move your eyes down and further apart relative to yourself. There's sliders to change the length and the shape of your nose. In other words, there are sliders that will allow you to morph a male head into essentially anything you want. And you can get it pretty close. And pretty soon we'll be able to just grab a picture of our heads, and I'm sure that's already capable. Just put ourselves in the game. So where am I going with all of this? Well, here's my big breakthrough thought. The game, I think I said this last time, they have me now as well as a subscriber to the game, and because I believe in subscribing to things that I support and that I get a lot of kick out of. They've probably put $150, $160 million into this game. And I don't look at it as a game, although I'm going to look at it as a game. A lot of people are telling me a lot of the MMOs have that. Well, that's great. So in any event, I didn't know that. But I'm not looking at it as a game. I'm looking at it as a $165 million real-time movie studio, with the ability, certainly in the upcoming version, to put the camera virtually anywhere. And some of the shots are incredible. I'm going to take those shots, bring them into Premiere. I'm gonna play around with them film look-wise, and I'm going to get them looking as cinematic as I can. And a lot of the exteriors, it's almost good enough. Now, let me just straight out say, I don't ever expect, well, not ever, I don't expect this to be photorealistic, but I expect it to be close enough so that it'll be interesting. So my problem now is, and this is my big breakthrough that I really like, the problem was, how do you get these characters to talk? Because you can get them to look around and blink, and even there'll be something like it, but it won't look quite right. So in other words, the game looks really good, and the further away you are from things, the better they look. So I was looking at the characters in this Star Citizen thing, and they're wearing the kind of advanced pressure suits that they're just now designing. Most spacesuits you've seen are these huge, bulky things, and basically it's a balloon. It's a fabric balloon that they inflate to more or less atmospheric pressure, and your skin lives inside of that, and because there's air pressure there, you don't suffer any decompression problems, but bending them is very tough because they're so full of high pressure. But now they're working on suits that are essentially like wetsuits. They're skin tight, and they basically thermally isolated, and they stop you from exploding because of pressure. So in the game, everybody's wearing these spacesuits, and I was thinking, God, I wish I could do something. And then it all of a sudden, boom, 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 hit me. I started searching for helmets that you could wear, because the helmets are most of the characters wearing helmets. And I found a couple things from Halo, and I didn't really like it very much. And then I started looking at motorcycle helmets. And I am here to tell you, some of these motorcycle helmets are intentionally designed to look like they're from fighter pilots, 200-300 years in the future. I saw 5 or 6 or 7 of them that I thought were great. Great. Then I looked at wetsuits, and wetsuits are exactly the same as these undergarments that these guys have. And then I looked at motorcycle, motorcycle armor, the kind of stuff you use if you go off a bike and so on. And honestly, it took me probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And what I discovered was, instead of having an online character who I could customize to look like us, because I don't have that kind of control over the game, but I could get a certain number of real-life costumes that would match the costumes in the game. And behind me yonder, I have a green screen, and I've got lights, and I've got After Effects, and I've got all this other stuff. So the thought occurred to me that what I could basically do is I could block out a scene between two characters in the game. The lighting and so on, it's just these two computerized characters basically talking to each other, shot number 1, shot number 2, and a wide shot. And then what I would do is I would keep those camera angles. I'd remove the characters. Those would give me background plates, in most cases animated background plates. And having had the computer thing as a reference, I would then be able to take green screen footage that was more or less from the same angle, composite it in there. I wouldn't have to composite it over the existing character because the existing character would be gone. I'd set up the shots using the virtual actors, and then I would go and get real actors doing this. Now, none of this is technically beyond my means at all. None of it is. It's actually quite simple given these days. And so what I'm so jazzed about is it means that if I can pull this off, I'm quite sure I can, it means that I can do all of this in order to make movies with a $160 million studio. I've always been a science fiction guy. I can make a series of science fiction movies, short ones, or longer ones. And I can start telling a story. I can start telling a serial story. And this is the way to reach younger people. I'm going to set up a new YouTube channel. I'm going to set up a new website. And basically, I was just sitting around. And by the way, I am going to do Big Bad Problems. I know people have asked about that. That is a real-world movie, nothing to do with computers. It's going to require a bit of money. And the reason I'm bouncing around excited, the reason I'm just jumping up and down excited, is because the biggest weakness in the Big Bad Problem pitch was I got a lot of financial sense, and I've got a lot of publicity, and I write, and the script and all that, and the artwork and the concept work, all of that. The biggest hole in it was I haven't done any directing since, man, I want to say 97, maybe one or two exceptions. And so I don't have a directing reel. But now I'm just vibrating because they have given me a world where I have complete control over the cameras. I have a very high level of control over costumes. I have unbelievable sets, unbelievable props. I've got all this stuff in there. So using the game engine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write stories, and then I'm going to tell them, and I'm going to use a combination of mostly game graphics, but when we get close, I'm going to take real-world stuff in the green screen, composite it over the existing shot, match the lighting as much as I can. Then when all of that stuff is composited together, then I'm going to apply a warp effect and grain and a shaders over both the computer stuff and the green screen stuff. And this is what we did. This is what we did with the virtual presidency. You've got computer elements, you've got live elements, and they don't. If you've got a discerning eye, you can clearly see the difference. But if you've got a live element and a computer element, and then you put the same grain over both of them and the same slight distortion over both of them and play with the lighting and the contrast, then you can get it good enough. It's not going to be perfect, and I don't plan for it to be perfect, but it'll be good enough. And so I bring a lot of things to this Star Citizen game that I haven't seen yet, and I've seen a lot of Star Citizen in the last 2 weeks. There are people out there, mostly young people, who are beginning to play with things like the camera's depth of field, the camera moves, and all that other stuff, but they're moving way too much. So I come into this little sandbox as a director. I come into a sandbox as a guy who knows how to compose a shot, and I come in especially as a writer, and I know how to write a story. And all of the things that look phony in the game are simple to fix. For example, if you watch people walk, they look like they're in a major hurry to get to the bathroom, and we're just going to slow it down. And if they won't walk any more slowly than this in the game, then I will just basically record it at 60 frames a second, and I'll just slow it down in Premiere and get a natural, realistic walk going. And then we can tell these stories. Now, I have not seen our friend Viper here, Foghorn. If you're here, I haven't seen you yet. But this is what I was thinking about on the drive over here. The kind of thing I'm talking about is, I'll just give you, because it just came to me half an hour ago, and I'm just on fire for it. So the first thing, as I sit here right now, that I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a lot. This is the other thing. I want to take real-world experience as a pilot, and I want to talk to actual infantry guys. I want to talk to Special Forces guys, and I want to get the moves correct, but most importantly, I want to get the language right. So in the game, just to give you an example, because I'm talking about film now, and I'm talking about politics, believe it or not. So when you keep hearing me talk about the game, you got to understand where I'm going with this thing. In the game, there's this... there's a space station, basically, and players land and dock on the space station. They take off and they fly away. And you come in and you land and you take off and you fly away. And that's how it works. And that's how everybody assumes it works. Wild Goose says something to do it on Twitch. I don't know. I know that Twitch is growing, and we're going to put it there. But so just hear me out here for a second. So in the game, you go. There's this quantum drive that moves you around a solar system pretty fast, and you hit this quantum drive, you get this really cool effect. But it's a cool effect, but it's a cool visual effect, but I'm going to add camera shake. I'm just going to add shaking camera. It's going to just really make it a lot more real. And sound effects. Every single footstep's going to have the correct sound effect and everything. So in the game, you appear right next to the station. You just basically go in and land. And what I'm going to do is, there's one more thing I have to set up. These graphics look as good as Babylon 5 since Dave Big Booty just mentioned it. What I'm going to do is everything's going to be choreographed. I think I mentioned this last week. If you're playing the game to win as a shooter, as a first-person shooter on the ground with, as a Marine or something, or in fighter combat, the correct way to win the game is to make these very tight turns and these weird reversals, and everything kind of rums back and forth and so on. Gecko wants to know why a quantum drive would shake. Well, it's because of micro adjustments in the quantum state. Gecko, the technology is good enough to get us from A to B, but the faster we can process the information, the less shake we get. And these are still pretty first-generation quantum drives. There's your answer for you, smart aleck. So instead of just and arriving at this thing, I'm going to have two guys in fighter jets, and I'm going to be one of them, and I'm going to be a colonel, and they're going to fly as if it were real combat, which means much, much wider circles than you'd get in the game. Much more realistic. Try and make it look like they did in Star Wars, where you basically have a couple of good guys knocking off, Messerschmitts that are attacking a B-17, that kind of thing. So when these guys go to the space station, I'm going to put them in the quantum drive. But instead of just appearing at the drive's doorstep, at the space station's doorstep, I'm going to back the whole thing up, everything back up, to the point where that space station's pretty small. And then when these guys come out of quantum drive, it's going to be something like I think Ullstar, whatever it's going to be. And no, but none of this is in the game. And I'm just going to say Ullstar approach, Buick 6, flight of 2, inbound to land with Tango, because it's a civilian base, and he'll say Buick 6, radar contact, 40 kilometers. Say aircraft type, and he'll give the aircraft type, and then as we get closer, he's going to hand me off to the is it Orostar? I forget the name of the space station. Then he's going to give me the handoff to the tower, and I'm going to take a picture, a part of that space station. It's going to be the tower. We're going to Olisar. Thanks, Matt. Matt is the only guy I met online, by the way. It took me 20 hours of messing around to have an hour with Matt, which was really fun. It's amazing, by the way, just a quick aside, it's amazing to suddenly see this space fighter. It looks, it's a Hornet that he was flying, and say, I know that guy. That guy's in there. And we're talking to each other, and we're flying, combat together. But no one's done any formation flying in Star Citizen that I've ever seen. I've never seen formation flying in the game, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay. I've never seen formation flying. So this flight of 2 is going to come in. You'll see a bit of the combat, and then we'll come in, and they'll switch us over to tower. We'll come in, we'll make the approach. They'll say, use the Mako 2 approach, cleared for Mako 2 approach, contact the tower for landing, and you get the landing clearance, bring it down, and then you contact ground, Mako 2 taxi, hover taxi to pad 08. Boom. And when we come in, we're going to do an overhead brake, going to fly right over the station, high speed, brake, and come around. And we're going to use all the right language. We use the air traffic control language. We're going to use all of this stuff. Now, Gecko says in space there's no atmosphere to work against. I understand that completely. But there's no quantum effect either. So the dynamics, the flight dynamics are built into this thing to make it feel like it's flying an atmosphere. So there's your science fiction figly for this. Okay, so then we come in and land. And basically I'm going to have this older guy. They get to the to the locker room, and they pull their helmets off, and we're going to be wearing wetsuits, which is going to be very comfortable under those lights. Wetsuits with the helmet, and we're going to try and match the existing skins, and I'm going to see if they can let me make a custom skin. And we're going to pull these helmets off, and we're going to sit there in this lounge, and we're going to have a conversation in the ready room. And basically, I'm going to basically say, this is kind of an existence, but this is not really living. This is not what I had in mind, because in the game it's the United Earth Empire, and the older pilot's going to say, I don't much like flying for an empire, and the younger guy's going to say, well, it's always been that way. He says, well, not always, and then slowly what's going to happen, the story I'm going to tell, we're going to reproduce this story in the actual game. I'm going to tell this story about this fighter pilot who's not happy flying for an empire. He has read some history. He knows about the United States 300-400 years ago, before everything went south. And then he's going to bump into a guy with some money. And together, they're going to start a project. And I think I was going to call it, what's the name? Anduril, which is the name of Aragon's sword, Flame of the West. I might stay with that. I might call it the Armstrong Vanguard. In any event, these guys together, he's going to say there's some other people talking this way. And what we're going to do is, in this universe, we're going to tell this story, and it's going to be in the game. We're going to tell the story through a series of movies. We're going to set up a whole world. So not only do we just need things like pilots and guys who are good with first-person shooters, we're going to need accountants, and we're going to need guys with all this stuff. Homer said, I'm sorry, Bone Canoe. Sorry, Homer Canoe. Bone Canoe said it exactly right. It's the common sense resistance in space. It's the common sense resistance movie in the common sense resistance. And what's basically going to happen is, if I understand the game correctly, the upgrade that's coming at the end of the month, you will be able to put a settlement down someplace, and that in this persistent universe where everything is connected to everything that already happened, you can die. You can die, not die and respawn. You die. And insurance pays for your ship, and you have to bequeath everything to a successor. So what I'm basically saying is, I would like to set up everything. I'd like to be doing our own exploration. I'd like to find a place way out of the way, start putting some settlements down. I'd like to have enough money in the thing so that this organization, this Anduril Vanguard, can actually start making money doing things like running cargoes and stuff like that, build up enough cash to get an actual fleet going, and see how far I can take it. See how far I can take this idea. Because the cool part of this is that while I've just talked about how I can make movies and script those movies, the thing that I'm just poking around and starting to get the feel of is, since this game consists of millions of people playing simultaneously, it should be possible to create an American republic in this universe and have it compete militarily, economically, politically with any one of the other organizations. Final thing I think I'll say about this, which is your clue that we're getting down to the last 20 minutes on this subject, is this. I thought, do I really want to do this? And then I saw a list of organizations, because in Star Citizen you can already pick organizations. And I thought, I've seen these before. I've seen clans before, and it's just going to be dumb and just really nuts. But I was going down the list of organizations, already existing organizations, and they're brilliant. They're brilliantly named, and the graphics, the logos, the icons, everything. It's fantastic. So this is basically why I'm so excited. I've got a $160 million real-time studio. I'm going to be able to have costumes that will allow us to use real actors for the close-ups, put them into this world with the dialogue, and then we can tell the story as a series of dramatic movies, but the story we're telling is not written yet, because we are going to create this story as we go. We're going to create it in this persistent universe. And we're not going to be a very big organization when we start. So 2 things will be going on. Number one, we're going to see if we can recruit million people to the idea of an American republic. That alone is gigantic, right? there are a million, I don't know, somebody's going to tell me how many people are playing Star Citizen. It's going to get bigger every day. But right now there are millions of young people who don't know much about these politics at all, don't know much about history at all. We're just going to be another one of 700 organizations in this gigantic universe. But if we can do this right, and if we can keep discipline, and if we can make these movies interesting, it's all starting to come together now even as I speak, then we should be able to recruit people into this thing. We'd have to have very tight discipline. You can't have people running around. The air stuff, the space stuff has to be very disciplined. We're going to run cargo routes. We're going to escort those cargo routes. If we lose a ship, we lose the cargo and all this stuff. We're going to do the accounting, going to do all this stuff. Because what they've built is absolutely incredible. And it gets better every day. And so if we can make this project succeed in the game as fiction, and if we then use the uber plot, the mega plot of how these things are happening, 1.3 million, says Matt, who's been my guide there, then we've got it made. We've got a history that is a real-time history, including real-time conflicts, growing economically. We'd have to get the economics right. We're going to need people who understand trade. We're going to need accountants. We're going to need people who are going to be interested in doing the exploring. We're going to need people who are interested in medical stuff, all of it. We're going to just get them from here, my fans, or from the game. And then as this thing evolves, we're going to tell stories as movies of how it evolves, shot cinematically. And those movies, we're going to try and get enough viewers out of to recruit more people into the in-game experience, and then we're good. And the beautiful part of this is I don't know what the plot's going to be because I'm not playing the adversaries. I'm not even playing all of the good guys. All of the decisions that'll be made by this republic, I just call it America, okay, because that's what it is. It's exactly what it is. It's America in space 400 years from now. So the people that we can recruit to this idea of building an America will be making their own decisions in the game in real time. We're going to need people who, as I say, who can understand shipping routes, because we're going to need in-game money, and we're going to have to use the in-game economy to get the in-game money. But I don't know what any one of the other 1.3 million opponents are doing. I don't know if they're going to launch raids against us. I don't know if we can form alliances. We certainly can. I don't know if we're going to form enemies. I don't know if the big government's going to come after us if we get too powerful. I don't know. But in any event, I haven't been this excited in a long time, because as those of you who've been watching this show for a long time know, despite your very kind words about the political commentary, which I'm starting to get the hang of, I suppose, my interest has always been in movie making. It's always been in science fiction movie making, and now I can bring politics to a world where somebody can tell me, perhaps telling me what the average age on Star Citizen is. I'm going to guess it's probably 16, 17, some older people, some younger people. Maybe it's 20, 25, something like that. I think I might be, although it's going to grow. So far, anyway, I'm the only person I've seen so far that knows how to tell an actual movie story. A lot of people have done fan movies, but they're not movies. They're trying, but they're not there. So I'm going to try and do all of this stuff together, and I am so bloody excited because now I've got the tools to do the kind of work I've been wanting to do my entire life. And Victor said, Media Matters is going to fund a player expedition to fight you. You know, let me just say this about that, Victor. If Media Matters starts an organization in Star Citizen, I will never be this happy again in my life, because if that's the case, we would be able to actually shoot at them. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We'd be able to actually shoot at them, which is not an option I've had out here, and I've looked into it. Apparently it's against the law. So anyway, I'm so jazzed. I'm jazzed about the costumes. I'm going to go looking for some money for this because to do this right, it's going to require some costume money. It's going to require sound editors. It's going to require some stuff. But I think if I go to people I know and tell them that what we're investing in is a series of 10 to 15 minute, 5 minute, 3 minute movies that are serial, it's an ongoing story. We're going to build an audience, going to build our own YouTube channel, and it's going to be seen by millions of kids, and they're going to get a political message, and they're not going to know that they're getting a political message. they're not going to know. You could just the first example I had off the top of my head was you have a couple of our guys walking into the room someplace, some room and some bar, some rundown bar and some rundown starport and stuff, and they walk in and they're standing there, and a couple guys come in and start shooting up the place, and our guys draw their sidearms and return some fire, and a bunch of people go down. And you can have a guy with a line saying, I guess they didn't read the sign about this being a no-gun zone. Maybe they just walked right past it. And this is where the message really is, This is where the message really is. It's little things like that where you can say, hey, kids, you're all using weapons here. You're using spaceship weapons. You're using personal weapons. Every single one of you is using weapons. And there's a team out there in the real world that's in favor of your ability to use weapons like you do in the game. It's called conservatives. And we can do this economically. We can do it all over the place. I am so on fire that I'm going to make the show relatively short. I'll do another half an hour or so of questions, and then I'm going to get back to this because I'm jumping up and down. And my fiance, who I believe is watching this now, how are you, sweetheart, has been unbelievably supportive and kind. I know a lot of people become game widows, but she's got a bunch of photographic work to do as well, and I suppose it's probably better to have your man in the back room making squealing little girl dorky noises than have him, out on the town someplace, talking with the guys over a bowling night or something. Dave Big Booty says, will there be aliens? I think they've got some, Dave, but the thing that is actually exciting to me is that I don't control this. I'm not the screenwriting god where I control the villains, I control everything. I don't. I can control a faction, and that faction can grow more powerful, but I don't control that stuff. So anyway, it's going to be great. And we are going to need players, and what we're going to need is actors, because in order to get this thing looking the way I want it to look, we're going to have to shoot it like it's a movie. And for those of you out there, and for those people that we recruit from the game and tell them this is going to be shooting cinematic movies, they think, awesome, I can't wait. You're going to get to find out. You're going to get to find out in this game, on this virtual set, in this virtual movie, the reality of what making movies is all about, which is it is inescapably boring. You will find it's just like, oh my God, yep, you just need to stand there, hang on, okay, and then we do it again, and this ship was a little bit late, we're going to have to do it again, just do the same gestures, same motions, and so on. And you just go in there for a couple hours and you shoot raw footage. You capture the raw footage at 4K, you bring it into Premiere, you edit it, get the dialogue in there, and do your compositing of your real-time people, and back out you go. Yeah. Anyway, it's a deal. It's a deal. I'm really excited. Okay, back to the Stratosphere Lounge show, which you may or may not remember being a political commentary show. So I'm back on the Facebook page. Haven't checked any of those. We're going down them in lists. Okay, so here we go. Steve Darrow says on the Bill Whittle Stratosphere Lounge page, on the Facebook Stratosphere Lounge page, we were discussing the best way to introduce people to you and your work. Just saying go to billwhittle.com may be overwhelming to someone who doesn't know you. Which of your many videos or essays, excepting your unfinished series, We the People Point 2.0, would you consider the best introduction to you and your ideas? That's a very kind question, and I'll give it to you so people can back up. It's an easy one for me to answer. There's several that I like. The most important work I've ever done, without question, is somewhat depressingly pretty much the first work I've ever done, and that's the true story of the atomic bombs. I am not 100% sure that's on my YouTube channel. If it's not, it's going to be. Of all the things I've done, I think that's the only thing that I would actually consider a historical document. I think if you watch that video, it's 17 minutes. If you watch that video, after it's over, the idea that we shouldn't have dropped those bombs just doesn't, there's just no one who can believe in it. So if that's not up, I'll get it up. But of the stuff that I'm 100% sure, and the reason I didn't have it up is because it belonged to PJTV. Then of the ones that I know for a certain factor there's a couple I like. If you want to have somebody introduce somebody to my stuff who's not really conservative or not really sure, I would start with a firewall called Why We Suck. Basically, Why We Suck is about the fact that, liberals say conservatives are straight-laced and they're mean and they're, and they're basically that we suck. And they're right, we do suck. And here's why we suck. We suck because, we don't believe you can print money. It'd be nice if you could, but you can't, so that sucks. We believe in personal responsibility. It's nice if you could run around and borrow all this money and then not have to pay it back, but you do, and yet that sucks. And basically, it's explaining why conservatism sucks, and it's I think it's a rather good introduction. Eat the Rich is a terrific video, if I do say so myself. Eat the Rich is interesting because it gives you people a sense of economic scale. Basically, in Eat the Rich, the research of which was done by Iowa Hawk, by the way, he basically says you could take everything, and I mean everything, from all of the corporations in this country and all of the rich people, and you might run the government for a year. Because if you took all the money from Exxon and Walmart, all of their profits, not tax them heavily, if you took it all, you'd run the government for 4 days. It's $40 billion. We spend about $10 billion a day, roughly, something like that. So Eat the Rich is rather good, I think. Number One with a Bullet is a video I like very, very much. It's a gun control video, and I like that one because it's very simple, and it's got a good amount of data in it. I'm rather pleased with this climate change thing, Bill Nye the Science Lie thing. I'm pretty happy with the way that one turned out. And Steve says I should do a best of page, and that is a suggestion that is going into the bank. In fact, that suggestion is getting written down right now because that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a best of. It's a fantastic idea. I'm so glad I thought of it after you did. A lot of people liked the virtual presidency inauguration speech on guns. It's called Guns. I thought that was rather good. The entire virtual presidency series is something I'm so proud of, and it didn't do very well at all. I think it's because it wasn't on the news cycle, but that's a members-only benefit, so we send that DVD out and signed, personally autographed to people when they become members. So there's that. Iconography, I thought it was rather good, showing how subtle the use of all of these things like color and font and all these graphic design elements, how powerful they are politically and how the left has used them. That went back to 2009, I want to say. 3.5 Days, is Claudia just pointed out, is pretty good. It was dealing with Occupy Wall Street, and it basically says, stop crying about corporations, you babies. Take 3.5 days, that's 1% of your life, and go spend it out in a cabin without any electricity, water, or food, and you'll start appreciating companies like Exxon and Johnson & Johnson a whole lot more. I liked the lynching, which is the Trayvon Martin video. And I like that one because I thought it did a good job of correcting people's images about that. So in any event, I'll put together a short list, and if I've missed anything, for God's sakes, let me know, and we'll make it a special page. It's a brilliant idea. We're trying to think about doing some cosmetic, complete redesign of the show cosmetically, of the website cosmetically. So thanks very much for that, Steve. Okay, moving on to our incredible friend Merlin Wendelboe. Let's open this baby up. So, Philippines President Duterte, it's not Duarte, I don't know how to pronounce it, has declared martial law in the large southern province of Mindanao in an effort to combat an ISIS affiliate that is demanding Sharia law. A, why are we not hearing much about this? I'd expect the left to be howling mad, making this a #1 story. And B, why is our side not saying yes? This is what must inevitably come to, and why aren't those wusses in Europe doing the same thing? In the immortal words from Starship Trooper, there's no living with bugs. That's pretty much well said. I know that that Barack Obama had a real major personal problem with the president of the Philippines, and I got to tell you, Merlin, I'm not really up on my Philippines politics, but my understanding is that this guy's a bit of a nut. with that said, anybody who's fighting ISIS is a friend of ours, right? And it should be crystal clear. I think we should be trumpeting that to the heavens. Yeah, you want to fight ISIS? We'd be happy to help. We can do a lot in terms of advisors. I know that sounds like Vietnam, but the problem with Vietnam was we decided we didn't want to win Vietnam. If we'd wanted to win in Vietnam, we would have won in short order in Vietnam. You want to send military advisors to help them out, that's great. That doesn't mean it's a guerrilla war. It doesn't mean it's an undeclared war. It means advisors and perhaps some weapons. Anything to keep the ISIS people moving around nervously at night makes me happy. However, having learned a few lessons over the last 50, 60, 70 years, I'd be very, very careful about not putting too many resources in the hands of somebody that unreliable. But yeah, let's go kick their butts. I liked Mattis's speech very much, needless to say. I said the night of the election, I said just getting Mattis as defense secretary would be worth everything that Donald Trump might have wrong with him. So Mattis says, imagine my surprise, we're no longer going to be in a war of attrition with ISIS. We're no longer going to try and degrade their abilities. We're going to find out where they are. We're going to track them down. We're going to kill them. Yeah, all right. I can understand that. And you know what? They can understand that too. So there you go. Back to Matthew Lloyd again. Matt, thanks again for all the Star Citizen help, and thanks for putting up with all the controller stuff a couple nights ago. We probably spent 2 hours watching my ship just go into roll state because the controllers and the drivers weren't matched up, but had a lot of fun doing that, and we'll be doing it again. And those of you who wrote earlier about Star Citizen, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. I just had a big brainstorm about all this that I just went through. Would you like me to talk about it again? So Matt says, Bill, your excellent capitalism video, you talk about equality of opportunity as starting from the same line while running down a football field. How would you respond to progressives who don't accept the premise that we all start at the same line? Some of us start out with a big head start, and others start off with serious disadvantages. Sure, the law applies equally unless your name is Clinton, but how is that different from a sport where the rules apply to both teams equally, but one team starts the game with several points already on the board? That's a fair enough question. So let's just take it as an example. Let's take a person who's born to a lower income family, let's say, and let's talk about a guy who's born into a world where his parents are billionaire. First of all, if you're born into a world where your parents are a millionaire or billionaire, the chances of you becoming essentially worthless are high. They're not 100% by any means, but they're not good. In many, many cases, you find that the more advantages you start out with, the less running you do, and it's not hard to figure out why, you know. It is, when I say start at the same line, I'm talking about legal protection. See, this is the point. In order for this analogy to hold up, they're not saying that some people start ahead of others. I'm saying in a society ruled by law, everybody is starting from the same line. What the variation in people is that they're talking about, with some people being rich and some people being poor, it's not that they're starting ahead. It's that there's some people who are just faster runner than other people. They're just born faster. And if you were to take a look at distribution in this country and have a major problem with the one percenters in terms of height, you know, those 1% bastards, the 6, 7 above guys who are, you know, lording it all over the rest of us in this basketball game analogy. No one doubts that there's a virtually, well, in fact, a random distribution of height. Height is not, you can't be born into a family. You don't get to pick that. Those are the cards you're dealt. If you want to be a basketball player and you're 5'3" and you want to play in the NBA, your dreams are about to be shattered in the same way that your dreams would be shattered if you don't have good eyesight and you want to be a fighter pilot. Or if you want to be a jockey, let's say, and you're 6'3" and starving yourself, you get yourself down to 178 pounds. You're not going to be a professional jockey. My point is, however, you can ride a horse and you can race a horse and you can play league basketball with some very good players, and you can fly airplanes that sound a lot and feel a lot like fighter jets, but sometimes you just can't get there from here. So the business about them starting ahead or not ahead is not really accurate because we're talking about the rules of the game. Of course some people run faster than others. Of course a person who's born into a multi-million-dollar family has advantages that somebody who's not born into a family like that don't have. It's idiotic to say no, let alone naive. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You are not racing against other people, right? You're not racing against other people. Somebody else's speed, somebody else's time doesn't determine your time. In other words, if I can do that 100 yards in 11 and a half seconds, and somebody else does it in 9 seconds, that doesn't mean that I have to do it in longer time. I get to run as fast as I can run. And as long as no one is being held back, or boosted during the race, as long as nobody has legal advantages over other people, then I think the analogy is a really strong one. People being held back or people being starting on a line ahead of the goal line, in terms of the analogy for your progressive people, would be, well, a great example would be a lot of the situation, after the Civil War. Before the Civil War, the slaves were slaves, really weren't even in the economy. But after the Civil War and they got basic voting rights, there was an enormous, enormous societal, racial prejudice against them that were, in fact, shackles around their legs. It made life much, 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 much harder for them. Much, much harder, incomparably harder. Same for women. I'm certainly old enough, just barely old enough to remember the idea that women, they make excellent nurses and teachers and stuff, but CEOs or fighter pilots, please, no. That's one of the changes that I had to make in my life, because it turns out they make superb everything. So prior to that kind of cultural revolution in the 70s, if you were a woman and you wanted to achieve these things, you were greatly disadvantaged. But you don't seem to be disadvantaged today. And as far as that goes, by the way, you might want to ask your progressive friends who say, you're saying that a rich white male has an advantage in this race, and that a poor black female has a disadvantage in the race. The rich white male starting from the 20, the poor black female is starting from the back of the end zone. And I would challenge you by saying, do you actually really think now that a white male has more opportunities than a black female does in this culture today? Do you really actually believe that? Do you think that if Harvard was looking for the final slot in its law school program and you had a black female and you had a white male with the same grades, are you actually telling me you think that the white male would have an advantage now? It's just a ridiculous thing to say. It's as ridiculous as saying he wouldn't have had an advantage 100 years ago. All of this stuff now is, all of the legal and societal pressures are now slanted not against minorities or the poor. They're slanted in their favor. And I want a world where I want a colorblind world. It's very simple, really. This is just all I want. I want a world where none of this matters. I don't think they should ask your race on a census form. I don't think they should ask you anything on a census form other than how many people are in the house. We need to know how many people are there, because we have to determine congressional representation. But other than that, that's it. So I think all of these job applications, race on a job application, no. I don't think I was going to say I don't even think sex should be on a job application, but you probably get that from the name. In any event, that's pretty much it, Matt. It is an example of two things. One example is the racing the football field analogy. One of the things it's an example of is that life is not a zero-sum game. If somebody finishes faster than you, it does not slow down your time. Your time will be determined by how fast you can run, and that's it. So somebody coming in ahead of you doesn't mean they beat you to the peanuts, that, there's only a bag for one guy. It doesn't work that way. So other people's speed does not affect you. But the much bigger point is, under socialism, if you want opportunity of result, then something does have to come in, because then it does matter whether somebody comes in faster than you or not, because the entire premise is that all of the times have to be divided equally. The entire premise is everybody's got to run the speed that they can all run at, which, as I say, is the speed of the slowest runners, not the average speed. Under socialism, if you want everybody to cross the line at the same time, it's not like you take the fastest speed and the slowest speed and have everybody run at that speed. You can't run faster than your fastest. And the entire race has to be slowed down to the speed of the worst runner on the field. And in order to slow down not just the fast runners, but in order to slow down everybody else, you have to shackle those people. You have to artificially slow them down. You have to get in their way and slow them down, load them up with weights. And that's why socialism is so morally evil. Forget the fact that it doesn't work. It's morally evil because to produce equality of result means that you don't have the freedom to go. Everybody talks about income inequality and nobody talks about output inequality. If you are one of those people that believe in equality of result, then you're just going to have to answer me two questions. Number one, is it fair that a guy who basically is living in his parents' basement and then on government benefits being paid for by other people, is it fair for that guy who does nothing but play video games and, and watch porn, is it fair that that guy makes the same amount of money, has the same house, same car, same income, as somebody exactly that same age who spent 15 years studying to be a brain surgeon and never had any real childhood, never had what we would consider college, never went out drinking, study. You're telling me it's fair that these two people get paid the same amount? Do you really actually believe that? I find that horrendously morally repugnant and unjust. However, even if you run into somebody that vile who said, no, doesn't matter, everybody should get the same amount, then the second part of that question would be, okay, if you're basically going to run a society where you're going to have a gun to my head and tell me that if I work like an animal for 15 years or if I just lie on the couch, I'm still going to get the same result, then how do you think that's going to affect the number of brain surgeons that we produce? Why would anybody become a brain surgeon? Why would anybody become an engineer? Why? Why would you do it? Why would people start businesses? What would be the point? Why would I be running this business, which is, I'm not trying to crucify myself, just in California, running any kind of business is very, very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. They take all your money and they regulate the living daylights out of you. So why would I do it? If I can just hang out at home and play Star Citizen and get the same amount of money as I get here, why would I do it? Why would I want to make movies? Why would I, why? There's no reason for it. Parenthetically, Zuckerberg gave a commencement speech at Harvard not long ago. And he basically said, we should have a guaranteed minimum income. He said, we shouldn't have to worry in this day and age about worrying about paying our rent and paying our bills and our food. We should have a guaranteed minimum income. And then he went on to say in the same sentence, I think, he said, that way young people can spend their time learning how to code and find out their true potential. In other words, if we all paid for everybody's minimum income, then people would use that time to become computer programmers, which is what Mark Zuckerberg needs in his particular line of work, but they're not going to get to work if there aren't any electricians or if there aren't any welders or any of the rest of it. So the whole idea is kind of self-centered, but it's also ridiculous. If you pay people money, they're not going to sit around and become educated people. They're going to just goof off. And I don't need to prove this point. It's proved every day. Right now, virtually everybody in this country has a cell phone. The poorest people, most of them have mobile phones. And that means that you have access to the internet, which also means that you have access to all of the information available to the human race. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of online courses that you can take that are absolutely free. And if Zuckerberg's theory was right, then people who would get $50,000 a year to do nothing would spend that time, 8 hours a day, studying how to become all these other things that they can learn how to become for free. But it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen. People may actually feel like it's going to be, oh, I got my $50,000, now I'm going to study how to be a welder, or those people don't need to be given $50,000. They already know how to work. I'm going to be a lawyer or something, so I'm going to take my $15,000 and I'm going to start to study law. Well, that sounds fine, and I'm sure for the first couple of weeks they're going to start studying law, but the next thing you know, it's going to be 8 o'clock at night, and their friends are going out, and they're not going to be studying law. They're going to be going out because there's no consequences for it. And after time, when it starts to get hard, because law is relatively hard, and so's engineering, and so's rocket science, and so's brain surgery, as it starts to get harder and harder, people will be less and less motivated to do it. Why should they? They're not going to make any bit of improvement in their life if they do it or don't do it. And then the next thing you know, the entire population is watching a WKRP in Cincinnati marathon, because that's human nature. That's how it works. You don't have to like it. But it's true, and that's why socialism is so immoral as well as ineffective. So much for that. I'm going to do two more, and then I gotta go. Back to Merlin again. I'm doing these in ranked order here, folks. In so many of my arguments with liberals, they claim that we conservatives are the ones who are crushing freedom when they point out something that has to do with sex that conservatives are against. I have to admit it, it's true. Conservatives are guilty as charged. So can we just make a deal, let them have all the sex and perversion they want, and in return, they give us government? I got to think about how I want to put this. It's not that I'm worried about how I'm going to say it. I'm just going to try and figure out what it is I'm trying to say. Everything that they believe in as liberals is about less freedom. They believe in policies that tax you more, which means you have less freedom to spend your work. Remind them that when they're taxing you for your work, that when they're taking your money, what they're really doing is they're taking your life. They're taking the hours that you spent at a job doing something that maybe you don't like. They're taking hours and hours and days and days and days out of your life. People are spending days, years, decades working, doing jobs either they like or they don't like, and the government is stealing that time from them. That time that they could have been at home, the time they could have been on vacation, the time they could have been having fun. They went to work to make money, and the government has stolen the time that they put in. They've stolen it and given the person essentially nothing back in return. So just the idea of tax is a form of oppression that means they lose right out of the gate. You can then follow up by saying, listen, I understand that there are some things that we need a government for, but those things are actually pretty limited. And back when we believed that they were limited and we knew what they were, we drew up a document that said this is what the government should do, federal government should do this, and that was pretty much it. And that's why we've gotten rich enough to be able to have socialists in a country like this, because where you have other socialists, they're starving to death. In Venezuela, they decided to go to, never go full socialist. And they did in Venezuela. And they went from being the richest country in South America to being the poorest, and there is no food there, and they're all trying to get into Honduras. And my understanding is that the average person in Venezuela has lost 19 pounds as a result of socialism. They've dropped 19 pounds, and they were not particularly round to begin with. So there's that. As far as the rest of the freedoms go, it's the left that wants to tell you everything. They're the ones, it's the left that's saying things like if you throw a frisbee on a beach, then that's a $1,000 fine. It's the left that is saying we don't want you riding ATVs out there. It's the left that's saying you have to wear a motorcycle helmet. It's the left that's saying all of this stuff. All of it is all on the left. And then they say except for sex. And the conservatives are trying to tell liberals what to do in the bedroom. There is some truth to that historically. I think the gay marriage fight is over, and personally, I think the gay marriage fight is over, and the correct side won. We seem to be letting that one drop, and we should let it drop. That's not an endorsement for homosexuality or anything like that, licentiousness. On the contrary, it's basically saying if you want to be left alone, which I do, then other people have a right to be left alone as well. They do not have a right to. They do not have a right to infringe upon our freedoms and our beliefs. They don't have a right to say you have to accept me. Of course you don't have to accept them, but they have a right. The marriage is not in the Constitution. Straight marriage is not in the Constitution. In fact, legal marriage, as we understand it, is a relatively recent invention as opposed to religious ceremony marriage. So again, it's the left, the left, the left. But what they're really talking about ultimately is abortion. I mean, really, when it comes right down to it, that's it. When they say that the conservatives are in favor of lack of freedom, they're talking about the freedom to abort children. And this argument is an argument that can be handled. No one's ever going to solve this problem, but this is the response. They will tell you that their right to an abortion means that they have their own freedom, and that by outlawing that right, you are restricting their freedom. And they will tell you, it's my body and it's my choice. And this is where you have to jump in real fast. Because, you know, I listened to that argument, it's my body, it's my choice. I listened to that argument for 30 years before I realized the truth of it, which is it's not your body. It's in your body, but it's not your body. We could take a cell out of any woman's hair, fingernails, blood, anything. We'd get a DNA match of that woman that would be 1 in something like 400 billion or 400 trillion. And that person would be a unique individual. That woman who's calling for this choice would in fact be a unique individual with her own body. But then if you took a sample of the cells of the embryo or the fetus, it's not that person at all. It's a completely different person. That's why we don't reproduce by cloning. If we reproduce by cloning, you'd have a case. You'd say, basically, I'm making a new body of mine inside my body, and I want to get rid of that body. Well, okay, I suppose you can make a case there. It's your body. But they don't. It's not their body. It's a different body. And the question then becomes, the whole issue turns on, is it a person, yes or no? It certainly becomes more person-like. I think we can all agree with that. But the question is it a person, yes or no? The problem for the left is that there is no milestone on the spectrum. There's conception and there's birth. I think we can all agree that eggs and sperm are not people. And I think we can all agree that a baby that's born, although there's some progressives that'll still go this far, but generally speaking, I think we can all agree that when a baby's in somebody's arms, the mother's arms, then it's a person, right? The problem is between conception and birth, there is no point, none, not one, where something happens like that. Things happen on a spectrum. The brain develops, things happen in certain order, obviously. But you can't put a marker down and say, this day is a person, and the day after that it's not. So you have to decide, is it a person, yes or no? And it's either a person from the beginning or it's not a person until it's born. And I think the case for it being a person from the beginning is stronger, because if you were to abort a baby an hour before its scheduled birth, anybody who doesn't consider that first-degree murder is utterly immoral. And so we have this problem in our society. We have this issue. And the issue is it a person, yes or no? And if so, at what point does it become a person? I think that a baby is absolutely a person. And since there is no point when it becomes a baby, as opposed to a fetus or an embryo, then you kind of have to say, well, then I guess it's a person the whole time. In any event, you've got a good argument to make against them. So if this is the only thing you're saying that conservatives are all about, then this is it. And I've made this argument before. If somebody says, well, you know, of course even if it's not my body, because it's not. It's just not. You can't make it by yourself, and it's not your DNA. Even if people say, well, because it's in my body, I should have the right to do what I want with it, then you can go to an argument that I thought of almost by accident, and it's kind of interesting, and that is the Civil War argument. I'm not going to get into the causes of the Civil War and the whole state rights thing. The South left the Union because of states' rights, and the states' rights that they were leaving over was the right to hold slaves. Pretty simple, really. So the Civil War was absolutely about slavery. So, using their logic, the question then becomes, was the North justified in launching the Civil War? And the answer to that question is, it depends. Well, what does it depend on? Well, it depends on this. If slaves are property, as the South maintained, then the North had no legal or moral right to go marching into the South and steal their property and let their property free. They have as much right to do that as they would to go down into the South, throw open the doors of a barn, and chase all of their horses off into the woods. They'd have no right to do that. They have no right to take that person's property. If a slave is property, then the North is wrong. But here's where you kind of circle back to the abortion argument. On the other hand, if slaves are people, if they're people, then the North is correct in its invasion of the South. And I'm not going to split hairs about the timing or anything. I'm just dealing with the issue as it eventually turned out. I'm well aware of the nuances of this situation. I want to get lectures about that. However, if slaves are not property, if they're people, then they are being held unjustly. They are human beings who have their lives out of their hands. Their lives are being determined by somebody else. And we can all agree that slavery is wrong. There's not a person, you can find a person out there who believes that slavery is morally correct. There are some people who keep slaves because it's economically convenient, but in order to have slavery, you have to believe that these people are property, that they're animals. And if you don't think that human beings, black human beings in America, if you don't think that they're animals, if you think that black slaves in America were people, actual humans, people, then the North has every right to go down there and free these people from this oppression and this misery and torture that's being inflicted upon them without their consent, needless to say, and without any power to resist it. So if you are a person who is pro-choice, then you can also say, according to that logic, then you're a Confederate and you believe in the owning of slaves. How could you say that? Well, I say that because you're not considering this fetus to be a person, and the South didn't consider slaves to be people either. That's why they were allowed to do with them as they wanted. On the other hand, if slaves are people, and if the fetus is a person, then you don't have the right to do with it what you want. Don't have to like it. It's just the way it is. My personal take on this, because this is a very difficult issue, and it's not an issue that's ever going to be solved, honestly. I cannot see a world where people agree on this. But I think there's one thing we can agree on, whether you think it's absolutely simple choice, and you'll hear some abortion advocates say this is a choice just like I'd choose my hairstyle or what I'm going to wear that day. If you're that far in one position, and if you're on the other position that says that women should be denied abortions because it's a person and they should lock them up, I think even on both sides of that spectrum, at both ends of that spectrum, I think everybody can agree on one thing, and we can agree on this. While there's no milestone at which point that fetus, that embryo, that fetus becomes a person, there's no one event where it happens. One thing we can do is we can say that certainly we can all agree that every day that goes by during the pregnancy, it becomes more person-like, right? It becomes more person-like. So my compromise is I don't like being told what to do. I don't think this is a civil rights libertarian issue at all. I think there is, in fact, a very compelling argument to be made that baby's not consenting to this act. But I think the one thing we can all agree on is the longer you wait, the more, some people will not agree with this, but I think most people would, the longer we wait, the more reprehensible it becomes. So if we're going to have to live with each other, my feeling would be you realize you're pregnant. You're going to know that within 30 days, right, one way or another. And once you realize you're pregnant, then you have a period of time to make that decision. And if the abortion happens in the first trimester, or ideally in the first 2 months, it is less, to me, it is less of a abomination. It's less of a moral evil. It's, if you, I know the pro-life people say that no, that's a ridiculous argument. That it's a person the second it's conceived. I happen to agree with you, but we do have to live together on this. So, closing this simple argument of abortion out, I would say the one thing we can all agree on, I think, is that if it turns out it is going to happen, it should happen as early as possible, and you have to make a decision, and you have to make a decision pretty early. And when I say early, I mean you've done it. You have 30 days. You know, that's not 30 minutes. 30 days is enough time, I think, for you to have made that decision, and that's my personal take on it. But I can't enforce that, and I know everybody has something completely different, and everybody has their own opinion on this one. It's one of the issues you never talk about. Somebody in the comment section said I didn't talk about prostitution, so let me talk about prostitution. I think I think prostitution, I don't think there's a case to be made against prostitution that I can think of. It is a horrible deal. The people who end up being prostitutes are usually become prostitutes out of a state of extreme desperation. I don't think any of them particularly enjoy it. And certainly most porn stars don't. And that's a different thing. People become porn stars not out of desperation. Many of them just do it because they do it. And suicide rate among porn stars is unbelievable. But from a philosophical point of view and from a moral point of view, I don't think that you have the right to limit that person's ability that this is in fact a perfect case of them doing what they want to with their own body. A lot of what makes prostitution such an awful thing today, which is the, young women out on the streets at 4 o'clock in the morning under a street lamp in very bad neighborhoods being beaten up by pimps and all the rest of this, has to do with the fact that it is illegal. A prostitute needs a pimp to protect her because she can't go to the cops. She doesn't have the option of calling the police. She has to have her own police force. And since it's illegal, she can't call the police and complain that this pimp took 90% of the money she made plus broke her nose. So if you make it legal, I think you get rid of a lot of that. I have come to the conclusion, I've changed my mind on this prostitution issue. I think it should be legalized. And I think also I've reluctantly come to the belief that I think drugs should be legalized too, because frankly, in America, for the last 30 years, if you've wanted a drug, if you've wanted heroin, cocaine, crack, if you wanted marijuana, whatever, if you've wanted it, you could get it. And so I don't see an explosion of drug use if it were to be completely legalized. What I would think would happen immediately if it was legalized is you would see all of these crime syndicates, these inner city gangs, the horrendous cartels in Mexico and South America, they'd be out of business pretty fast. And people are going to get what they want. If they want it badly enough, they're going to get it. If you have a problem with legalizing drugs, I would refer you to prohibition. There was an example where people made the case that by making alcohol illegal, you will reduce drunkenness. And by reducing drunkenness, you will increase people's standards of living. You'll reduce the amount of spousal abuse. When I say spousal abuse, sorry, I sometimes fall victim to this myself. I meant to say wife beating. And all of this will go down. And we tried it. And it turned out that not only did it not work, drinking levels and alcoholism rose during Prohibition. There were more alcoholics during Prohibition than there were before or after. As George Freeland just points out, we right now live in the worst of both worlds. He says criminalization plus selective enforcement equals tyranny. That's exactly right. Right now we live in the worst of both worlds. We live in a world where a lot of this stuff is simply, we just turn a blind eye to it. So California's a little unusual in that regard, but let's say, somebody's selling crack on the corner and most policemen are not generally interested in busting a low-level crack dealer. They're usually going after bigger fish. But the fact is that person is breaking the law, and the law can be enforced anytime we choose to. That's not right. It's not right that you should be able to perform criminal activities in the light of day without too much worry about having that law enforced, because it does make you subject to the whim of the prosecutor, but it does something much, much more important than that, much worse than that, and that's simply this. If people are flouting a law, if there's a law that is not being enforced, you need to eliminate that law, because if you don't, people lose respect for the entire idea of the rule of law. If it turns out that the state, through the police or whatever, is enforcing some laws and not enforcing others, then you need to eliminate the laws that they're not willing to enforce, because by not enforcing existing laws, they're discrediting the entire idea of the rule of law. They're discrediting the entire idea of law enforcement. You can't very well be in favor of law enforcement and have it be something, that arbitrary. Of all the things that the Obama administration did, the most destructive and certainly the most infuriating to me was he selectively he got a Justice Department that backed him up in terms of selectively deciding which laws to enforce and which ones to ignore. That's not civilization. That's tyranny. You don't get to decide. You don't get to decide. It's the law is the law. If you break the law, you need to pay the price. And if you don't do that, then you need to get rid of the law. And I think the final thing to say about that is this. Allowing people to break the law produces pretty much the same effect as making empty threats with children. If a child has a temper tantrum or something, and you say, up in his room, let's say, and you say, you either stop misbehaving or else no dinner for you tonight. You have to enforce that. You don't have to say it, but once you say it, you have to enforce it. Because if you don't, then that child is going to know that you are not serious about boundaries or punishment. So if a kid has a temper tantrum and you threaten him with a punishment and he continues to do it and you don't apply the punishment, then that child has lost respect for you as a parent, not just personally, but they've lost respect for you as a parent in terms of somebody responsible for making sure they live long enough to get to 18. So then you end up with a situation that we see all the time, which is, John, put that down. Put those cookies. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be John. I meant to say Ashton. You put those cookies down right now. I mean it. Put them down. And the kid keeps climbing. Says, if you eat that cookie, you're going to be in real trouble. That's it. One cookie. That's all. If you have any more cookies, you're going to be in absolute trouble. I'm not kidding this time. I really mean it. You know, you're a joke. You know, you're a joke. And I know it's very hard for single mothers because traditional conservative ideas really work really well. There's, I think, a lot to be said for the entire good cop, bad cop argument of the traditional nuclear family. And I'm in favor of nuclear power. I think the good cop, bad cop thing actually is a very sound and very effective way of modifying people's behavior, which is what we're trying to do with children. And furthermore, I think that, obviously with individual exceptions, but as a general rule, both parties are biologically suited to those roles. I think that women have an extremely difficult time being the bad cop, especially if they're trying to deal with everything on their own. Men, on the other hand, have no problem with this at all. I see kids having temper tantrums at Walmart, and I just said to myself, if this were my kid, this would be over today. It'd be over today, because they can cry and squeal when they want to, and they can say whatever they want to about it. They're going home and they're going to bed, and that's it. And so I think males actually have a sort of a conditioned biological response to that kind of misbehavior and that disrespect for authority. They don't get into sensitive mode or discussion mode. They get into this. Bill Cosby, famous rapist apparently. But Bill Cosby was very brilliant comic, and he had very brilliant things to say, especially about family. And he was talking about, I think he was talking about his parents, or maybe he was talking about one of his kids or something. And one of the kids was misbehaving, and I'm virtually positive it was Cosby. And Cosby basically said that he said to this child, he said, listen, you keep this up, you're going to regret it. I brought you into this world, and I can take you out. I can make another one looks just like you. I thought, yeah, that's effective. It worked. Anyway, I think that's about it for tonight. I have to go and pick up my lovely fiancée, and then we're going to go grocery shopping. I'm going to go back and have a nice dinner at my own home. I've been sitting out. We rented a house starting a month ago, and for the first time in my 58 years, I have been coming home to a nice house with a big backyard by California standards, and sitting out there at sunset, eating dinner on the porch with this woman I love so much, and our pets are there, and it's like I don't have to be sitting here till 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's just very, very good, and I just can't believe it took me as long as it did for me to figure these things out, but I have an interesting path to walk, I think, one of these days. It's going to But in any event, it's been terrific. So, honey, I'm leaving here soon, and I'm on my way. And as to the rest of you, I certainly hope all of you have similar situations. And for those of you who don't, and I know that's many of you, I was talking to Natasha about something. Yeah, I don't think this is too personal. And there was something she was worried about, and I said, don't worry about it. I said, honey, be of good cheer. And as if you don't know this by now, my fiance is Russian. And she said, what did you say? I said, be of good cheer. It means be happy, be cheerful. She said, I thought you said be a good chair. And so I would just simply say what I say to her every day now, and that is simply this: if you're not where you want to be personally, and life looks like it's caving in, I've been there for most of my life, and my advice to you would be just be a good chair. Be a good chair today. Understand that all of this stuff can turn for the better, and also understand if you're living in a wonderful situation, it can turn for the worse as well. So don't take it for granted. But if you're really struggling out there, I can certainly relate. My life improved very late in life because I didn't give up. I wanted to a few times, but I didn't. So if you're one of those people out there struggling with depression or loneliness or all the rest of it, there's not much I can do for you right now other than to tell you today, just be a good chair. And tomorrow is a different day. Tomorrow you'll have to fight that fight all over again. But for now, be a good chair. And so really sometimes it's just that simple. All right, that's it for this Stratosphere Lounge editions. I'm going to upload both of them tomorrow. And I've got probably another 15, 20 minutes here, honey. And then off we go. So thanks again for joining us. Very excited about some of this stuff. We should start seeing some new things again. By the way, if you're interested in any of the Star Citizen stuff, I got about 6 or 7 emails before. If you're interested in doing it as an actor, or if you want to be part of this, we'd love to have you. Just send another email that says Star Citizen in the heading to info@billwhittle.com. We're going to need actors. We're going to need people of all kinds of things. Somebody's built a laboratory. And now we can actually conduct. It never occurred to me to just this split second. Somebody's made a laboratory so realistic in terms of the transactions, the economy, power plays, all of it, that you can actually now start to perform experiments on human behavior. You get to see, does socialism work, yes or no, and all the rest of it. All right, it's great seeing all you guys. Thanks again for joining us, and I think I'll be here next week. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't be. But again, thanks for your support, especially thanks to the members to whom we are eternally grateful. And Dave Big Booty has invoked Vectron, and thank you very much by Vectron's Golden Claw. I wish you all a good evening and a good day, and we will hopefully see you the same place, same time next week. Bye-bye now.